You're back with the dulcet tones of Breaking Down Security. I'm Brian Brake, and back with us this week is, of course, Miss Berlin.
Yay!
And Mr. Betcher.
Hello.
And Ms. Berlin, of course, has been out for the last couple of weeks. The first week she was ill, feeling sickly. The week after that she was, I don't know, she gave me some lame excuse about being in Germany. So
it made it really hard to podcast.
How did Germany go?
Really well.
Yeah?
Yeah, really well.
And
I'd never been there before, and I had a lot of fun. The conference I went to wasn't an information security conference, which was different.
Wait, what was it then?
Yeah, so when Derby tweeted out that I was having the mental health village there, this guy contacted me, and it's called Doshfest.
Doshfest.
So for the 3 countries that are involved in their Google developers group.
Mm-hmm.
So D for Deutschland, Germany, right?
Yeah.
A for Austria, and CH for Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
And it was interesting. It was the first time they had done it, and the venue wasn't the greatest, but it was nice. It was way lower key than the one I did at Derby. There weren't any talks or anything. It was just kind of a lounge.
Oh, okay.
But one of the organizers contacted me after Derby tweeted out about theirs, and he wanted to see if I wanted to go over there.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So they did you talk at all, or was it just the village?
Nope, just the village.
Oh, that's weird. So did you have a lot of people in the space?
No.
Oh.
I don't know. I want to say maybe 3 dozen total over 2 days.
Oh.
But it was a small conference. They had maybe 300 people.
Oh, okay.
So percentage-wise, I think it was about the same.
Right.
And considering my lounge was on the other side of the college building that we were in.
Okay.
It made it hard to find. So.
Oh. Well, logistical issues aside, it sounds like you had fun, though. Did you go and do any sightseeing?
I didn't at all, really.
Oh.
I mean, other than dinner to a couple nice places, but...
Yeah. So you met some new people?
I was only there for 3 days.
Oh, wow. So you went, did the conference, and then flew home immediately?
Yes, pretty much.
Wow. So you didn't even have time to have, proper jet lag?
Oh, I had jet lag the whole time I was there. I just never recovered from it.
Oh, my hell. Wow. Okay. Well, Mr. Betcher, how you been this week?
Not too bad.
Yeah. I was I was very happy about Miss Coldwater, Ian Coldwater's talk about Kubernetes. It's Netty Pod.
I'm so sad that I missed it.
That's okay. You can listen to next week, part 2.
No, but being on it, I wanted I've also InfoSec Sherpa. I was supposed to be on podcast with her now for the last 3 years, and it never works out. It's terrible luck.
Well, maybe you two have never been in the same room together. Maybe you're like Superman and Clark Kent or something.
You never know.
Or, Supergirl and Cara Danvers. Anyway. Wow. Yeah. So we're going to bring our guest on because we're going to need the time because we got a lot to talk about. So if you want to listen to naive Brian talk about some of this topic, you can go back clear to 2016, around episode 20-ish or so. And we had this guy on with me and Mr. Betcher. This was in the before times of BC before, no, was it BC? Was it BB before Berlin? Yeah, there you go.
So the podcasts that don't really matter.
Wow. Yeah. It was crap.
Before we got famous.
Yeah, it was crap before we brought, Mando on. Yeah.
Before it got real.
Yeah. Before the explicit tag was a regular. Yeah. Before the explicit tags. Yeah. So we're having Jarrod Frates back on, and at the time we had Jarrod on, he was a year into his brand new job at Inguardians, I think, a year and a half, and we started talking about what to expect when you're expecting a pen test in this case, not a baby, of course, but a pen test. And in the last, 2 years, you've had a couple additions to the family. You're still working at Inguardians, and we have constantly been trying to get you back on the show to, continue talking about this this issue. And I've changed jobs. Mr. Betcher's changed jobs. Miss Berlin's, came on the show and
changed jobs
and changed jobs. So, wanted to, maybe get a take from somebody who's now working at a pen test company, myself, but also get Mr. Betcher and Miss Berlin's point of view on this. So, welcome, Jarrod, back to the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good overnight, wherever you are.
Yeah, there you go. So let's get things out of the way. You're at Jarrod Frates on Twitter, because when we first had you on the show, I couldn't pronounce your name. I got better. At JARRODFRATES, Jarrod Frates.
Yes, because I had no creativity when I was creating my Twitter handle.
That's okay. Have you heard mine?
Today's actually, I got an alert from Twitter. Today's my 8-year anniversary on Twitter.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. So before we get to the actual discussion about the pen test, there was some very interesting Twitter story that came out today, as a matter of fact, from Tinkersec, at Tinkersec on Twitter. He did an engagement, and he was like, look, children, gather around the fire, and Uncle Tinkersec will tell you a story. And you read through it, and there's a link in the show notes, but he was kicked off a network. He was on an engagement. He got kicked off the network. They found him, and they hunted him down. And that's what it says, and physically hunted me down. So
it was very Mission Impossible-esque. He could take it.
Yeah, it was right. So he started on the inside. So he actually was brought in as a new employee. The CISO was the only person with the get-out-of-jail-free card. Was given a work computer, an ID, a badge. So basically, he was doing the tool or the role of an insider threat. So he was a malicious new employee, and he was trying to wreak all kinds of hell. In the marketing department, he was quote unquote Jeremy for marketing. So they really went through a lot to get him onboarded. I mean, he had a week only to be on site, but I mean, they brought him in, made introductions. He was, he actually got onboarded and everything, which I found interesting.
Yeah, usually that's not how the social engineering is done, because there is an aspect of social engineering to that, even though, he was sort of walked in and provided a bunch of the tools, but he still had to convince the people around him that he was cool.
Yeah.
Or at least not a threat. And, ultimately, well, I'm not going to give away the story, but it didn't quite go as planned on that aspect. But those kind of engagements I have not been on myself, but they are really interesting to hear about those who have. And the kind of things that you can do are so on a lot of our internal tests, we get access to some workstation. Usually it's a new build that's done for us. We get generic credentials, and it's like, okay, go and see what you can do. And there's a lot of opportunity there, but not the same opportunities as what Tinker was talking about. Right. Being able to look around and physical access and just overhearing things,
right?
Stuff like that. So it's a really cool thing. And the story, he's just a fantastic storyteller.
It was definitely a funny story, or actually it was an interesting story that a lot of people who've done a lot of engagements are going to be like, yep, I've had that issue, or yes, that happened to me. So there were some things that he did, we're not going to give all of the secrets away, but there was a couple of things that he came up against that actually kind of stymied him. The ability for the local admins to be restricted. He was like, nobody does that. Who actually restricts local admins in your environment? So he was stymied by what I would consider to be rather simple things like that. Do you have go ahead?
I was going to say, and the company that hired him for that specific type of role, where the CISO is the only one that knows, and they're actually going through the process of figuring out the correct way to test insider threat.
Right.
I just think a company that has gone through all of that probably is already going to have pretty fantastic defensive inside measures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where a lot of places I don't think do. That's why they make you start from the outside, because they're hoping their perimeter defenses are better than their internal.
Yeah. And there's a philosophy that I've heard at other companies. It's like, well, we should trust who's working with us, because if we can't trust them, then we can't,
Well, there's trust, and then there's not giving them the keys to the kingdom on just because you're too lazy to configure
Yeah,
things.
I think, Amanda, you've got a great point. Jarrod, do you find that to be the case where companies that are really, really insecure are like, okay, hack us, just we're not going to tell you anything. We're not even going to give you any IPs, right? All the way down to, hey, here's a machine. You're on the network. You popped a box. See what you can do. Yeah,
we run into the range of that. So we do get some borderline crystal box testing for internal of, here's our password policy, and here's some credentials, and see what you can do. And then we go and we look and we find out that 25 or 30% of their users are domain admins.
Oh God,
it's not going to go very far. Hey, the record, and I think it was Larry Pesci, one of my colleagues, that ran into it. The record was on I think it was 300 and something users in the domain, and 250 of them were domain admins.
Oh my God.
And it makes it easy because they can get to all the stuff they need.
Yeah.
But then we get all the way down to, here's a web app, and, we think we've got it locked down, and we want you to test the whole thing all the way through, but we're not going to give you credentials because you're hackers, so you should be able to get them.
Right. Right. At my job, we're quick to tell them, hey, you're spending a fair decent amount of money. I won't lie. We're not exactly what you would consider cheap here in the industry, but if you want us to spend a week trying to just get credentials to log into your system to test the application, then, you're wasting. We consider it a waste of your money, and we don't want to be that way. So, we try to suggest to the customer that, some credentials is good. And usually the customers we work with don't ever ask us, just to do a complete black box test. We don't, we tend to shy away from those as much as possible.
Yeah. There are cases where we can go through and find out, we have clients that use fairly predictable schemes. They'll use 2 letters and 4 numbers.
Right.
And if we can figure out an idea of what some common first 2 letters are, well, the number piece is easy because, then we've got 10,000 max for each letter pair. We can do password spray and see stuff like that. But if you're rolling out your application for the first time and you have 5 users total in the entire database, expecting us to figure out how to get in isn't really worth it. And if you think we're going to get in anyway, you're probably not ready for a test.
Yeah. Yeah, because they think, you should be able to get in because, you're uber elite hackers. But most attackers have way more time than simple pen test would have to be able to get into things. And, they bide their time. They look around, they figure those things out. When you're working a 1 to 2 week or, 3 week gig, you don't really, have that kind of time. So,
yeah. If you want to pay us to test your app for a year, we can do that.
Yeah, that's right. All the gold.
We're not going to turn that opportunity down, but there are probably better places for you to spend that kind of money. Yep.
So I'm gonna put this kind of to a round table because Amanda's she works for an MSSP, so I'm certain that she's got some customers that are engaging in pen testing, and Mr. Betcher, he works for a company that will ask for pen tests. So I'll go to Miss Berlin first. Do you ever have your customers tell you that they're going to have pen tests? And, do they ever let you know ahead of time, or is there any kind of, warning when that happens?
The only time it usually happens is if it's like a redo. So they've already had a pen test and we've not alerted on the things that they need to alert on because, say, they're not sending us the right logs, or there's some blind spot somewhere, right? Okay. So usually they'll tell us then, but initially they're not supposed to.
Right.
I mean, otherwise we're not doing our jobs to detect the right stuff, right?
Yeah. So do they come to you after the engagement and say, hey, we had a pen test. What did you guys see? Or why didn't you tell us you were this happened during the pen test?
Yep. Yeah. We'll get that a lot afterwards. And because we also I don't think it's really in their contract or anything, but we always offer the service of, walking through the pen test report, line by line to see, all right, well, if you wanted to detect on this attack, you would have had to send us logs from these devices with this level, and we would need to create alerts around that.
Right.
but it's a very back and forth process, which is nice when they do share the pen test results, because then you get a better end result after you do pay for it, because they're already paying us monthly, right, as a MSSP. So they should at least get that bang for their buck.
Sure. So, Mr. Betcher, you guys employ companies that come in and do pen tests, right? So, right. I mean, what are some of the things that you ask them to do? Is it depending on scope, or is it depending on what scenario you guys would like to play out on this?
It all depends on what the management team feels is necessary to do at the time. Usually, it's unfortunately to check a box.
Right. So
my prior company, which was smaller, the security team would know about it. And we would try to take a tact like, okay, let's just do things normally. We know it's going on, and see if our alerts are working.
Right.
Right. And then we'll tell the pen tester, okay, we saw this alert and we investigated. It looks like you guys, is it? Things like that. Or if they do happen to pop a box that we know about, then we can kick them off and then go to them and say, was this you? And usually they'll say, yeah, that was us. In a bigger company like the one I'm at now, typically it's, well, there's two scenarios. If the hackers don't succeed, it's like, yeah, you guys, we had a pen test and, you know, they didn't really get much. Or if they did get something valuable, they'll say, okay, here's patient 0. Now go figure out what happened.
Right.
Right. And so we come in after the fact, sort of like, I don't know, sort of like we've detected it now.
Mm-hmm.
And then go in and get forensics involved and see what you can get out of the logs and see if we can determine how far they went, things like that. So there's a lot of options there in the latter case and the former case.
Cool.
Yeah, we've had customers come, like if we've alerted on something that the pen tester was doing, they'll usually tell us then.
Right.
Like, yes, this is, we're having an active pen test. You caught that, and then we'll just save the rest of the alerts that we can correlate with that till afterwards, so they're not also being inundated.
Right. So, so Jarrod, you mentioned here on some of your takeaways, and that was some of these things are bulletized because Mr. Tinker had added those at the end of his story about lessons learned or whatever. Are these takeaways that you tell the blue team before or after you go through the engagement? Like, are you ready for a pen test? Do you have these things? Otherwise, you probably shouldn't have our pen test.
We try to have a little bit of a relationship with our clients, and the type of a relationship that we have depends on the client. We have some that we do a lot of work with that they have broken up their testing into a bunch of smaller ones. They'll have usually one or two large ones through the year that we have to get into sampling where, we touch 5% of the workstations and 25% of the servers or something like that. And but we have others that that are just sort of they come to us, they want their test and they want the report, and then we don't hear from them again until next year. And then they come to us and they say, hey, can you do another test? And we go in and sometimes we find out we're doing the same test as we did the year before, because they haven't fixed most of their stuff. The better the relationship that you have with your testers, and this matters whether you keep the same tester or you rotate testers, the better the relationship you have with them, the better the understanding they have of your business, the better results you're going to get from the test. And the same thing applies to the MSSPs. We've told, we have people that come to us and they say, especially like career security people, and they say, hey, our company has an MSSP, and what do you think about MSSPs? And there's this sort of like, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, please tell us that they suck. And we tell them all the same thing. We tell them, look, MSSPs they're not personnel replacements. They are force multipliers. if you don't work with them, they don't know what to look for.
Right.
Yep.
And the better they understand your business, the better they're going to be at catching things. And that is whether it's somebody coming in from China or Romania or whatever, or a pen tester.
Right.
And if they know where to look, they're going to be able to put things together much more easily to try and figure out where things, or to see where the gaps are. They'll also understand in many cases where it is, like Amanda mentioned, they'll point out where your logs are short, where some stuff's either not getting delivered or not enough detail, or something where the logic train doesn't match up. And so, yeah, build your relationships with all of your security vendors.
Cool.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It makes my life so much easier.
Well, aren't you like, they don't really want to talk to you until something bad happens kind of thing? Is that how you see a lot of things?
Yeah, and they just think sometimes it's just this magic service.
Right.
No matter where I've been, they just think it's a magic service that you can turn on and boom, they're just getting alerts now. Yeah. And I can tell you the people that are nice to work with that are also super attentive and just add us as part of their team have way better security.
Yeah. Well, because they get it. It's a maturity thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not. I have customers right now of both kinds. Some of them get irritated when we send any alerts at all. Others are working with us daily to make everything better.
Right.
So, do they get irritated because you send them false positives? But that's because they don't send you. Okay.
The one I'm currently thinking of is irritated at us because we're sending him too many actual alerts, and none of them are false positives.
That's not good.
He's just too busy to deal with it. So
yeah. So Jarrod, do you think that in your line of work, companies don't want to necessarily reach out and have a working relationship with y'all because you're just there to tell them what's wrong, not what's right?
I would say so. For Inguardians, I think the fraction of those that are willing to pursue a relationship is higher. That may be because, honestly, we're a bit on the more expensive side. You get what you pay for.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But even at the previous, even at my previous employer, I would say probably a good between 40 and 50% were really interested in what was going on. And I think we're probably at Inguardians we're a bit higher than that. We're not 100%. We do get people who come in and they want to check a box and go away. And okay, that's fine. We're still going to give you the best test that we can,
right.
And hopefully you'll heed our recommendations. But as I was saying before, if you come in expecting to build a relationship with us, you're going to have a better time overall.
Cool. All right. So let's say people are wanting to build that relationship. What are some of the things that they should do before you're actually doing the test? I know we've got some points in here. Talking it over with the stakeholders. So who would be the stakeholders in this case? Would it doesn't this depend on the scope of the engagement? I mean, if you're going to be testing all the things, technically that would be every department in the organization versus, we've got a brand new web app that we're doing. So the stakeholders would flex a bit, right?
Yes. So the stakeholders at the most basic level, the stakeholders are whoever's running the company. Right. It's their job to make sure that money is still coming in. And by the way, that applies no matter whether you're for-profit or non-profit, you church or whatever. If you have this infrastructure that somebody could get into, you need to make sure that's secure, because otherwise, if the money that's coming in goes elsewhere, whether it's sales diverted or credit cards stolen or whatever, you're going to have less coming in. At a somewhat deeper level, it's whoever owns the particular systems, and that can be at a department level or it can be at an IT level. And sometimes it's all of the above. We have one client in particular that literally the board of directors gets involved. They get a copy of the pen test report.
Wow.
And they go through it. And that goes down to the executives of the company, and that goes down to IT and auditing, and that goes down to those that are actually working on the servers and even those that are working on the help desk. And they are extremely responsive. They went from, so we came in first time about 2 years ago, and they said, hey, look, we know you're going to get into things. We're not done with restructuring our IT or our security architecture. And we got way further, way faster than they thought. Like I want to say it took us 4 hours to get domain admin. Wow. So like we show up on Monday and we got domain admin, then we went to lunch. And the second time that we came in earlier this year, it took us 2 days, and it was literally like 9:30 at night that we got domain admin. And and they were kind of like, oh, well, you still got it. We said, no. From a time perspective, you guys did like 4 or 5 times better than you did last time. Right. Not to mention that we had to get your head of IT involved to tell you guys to stop blocking us.
Right.
So, that's one of those cases where the relationship really works, but they also had enough people involved in the entire thing, knowing, well, they didn't know at first that there was a pen test going on. They figured it out about a day and a half into it. But they involve all of the levels once the report actually comes in. And actually, in this particular case, this last test, they involved all the levels during. And in both cases, they flew us out for a 1-day debrief that was an entire day. Sometimes we go out and we do a debrief, and it's like 2 hours in front of the board of directors or the executives. And, we tell them at a business level, here's what happened. And what these guys do is they bring us out for a full day to essentially train all of their levels in what we did.
Okay.
And that kind of ownership of the process, or not of the process, but of the results, is fairly rare. But we have watched them go from really, maybe you should reconsider the number of systems that are facing the internet, to you guys are about average, and that in 2 years.
Yeah.
Why would the board of directors be that involved in a pen test? And I'm not being facetious about it. I'm just saying, wow, you just never hear that.
You really don't. When we learned about that, it really surprised us, because we find a lot of cases where the executives get involved to one degree or another. Usually like the CIO, maybe the chief operating officer, chief financial officer, since they're involved in risk, and sometimes the CEO. The board of directors in this case was involved because they figured out fairly early on, I guess we weren't part of this because the whole process got started about 4 or 5 years ago. But they figured out from what they were hearing on early tests fairly early on that things were not just bad, but they were like catastrophically bad. And they knew that unless they got behind things, stuff wasn't going to get done. And they are in a PII sensitive industry, and they knew that if something happened, it would become a major national story, and due to certain circumstances, possibly an international story.
That makes sense. Yeah. So when you had them come out, and when they had you come out and they were doing the debrief and it was a day-long thing, you basically had to tell everybody the same thing, but with a different point of view or with a different bent to it. So the board wants to know overarching kind of stuff, down to the rank and file. The help desk folks about, like fairly, well, I would say fairly technical, depending on how technical the help desk is. So you would tell like how many different groups the same story every time, but just in a different way.
We have yet to actually talk to the board. But we have talked to the executives, and they have asked some very pointed questions sometimes, and they are very deeply involved in it. And then we go over the results because each time it's been multiple tests. We do some external, some wireless, some web, an internal test, and then we present all of that. And so it's basically going through, okay, here's what we found. And inevitably, a few times during it, we get somebody who says, oh, wait, that's not supposed to be that way. Where did you find that? And we say, okay, well, we found WEP in this location. We found, we were able to do password sprays in this other location, and they take notes and they ask questions and they look for clarifications. Okay, what tool did you use? Where can I get that? That's all in the report. And not that I'm trying to short them. It's just that sometimes I don't have the URL right off the top of my head. Yeah, go to github.com/uberhacker/. So, but we pointed to it. We say, look, read the report. There's lots of examples in there. This is the tool that we used. I try to get a couple of demos in for key things. But that's one of the things that I love about them is that from help desk to general IT to their telecommunications group, because I sat down and I talked VoIP security with one of the guys, and up into their security group, into their auditing group, they're all invested in it and they all want to make it better. And it makes me feel really good when I come away from one of those and, it's like, wow, these guys care and they want to make it better.
Right. So let's say you've got an org, new company. Is management buy-in a requirement for pen tests? I mean, I'm asking kind of a rhetorical question because obviously management has to have buy-off on a monetary venture such as this, but for real change and legal, yeah. For like real change or to change the culture so that the next time you come in you don't see those. Do you have to get management to care about the vulnerabilities when you're doing the brief?
It helps a lot to make sure that you get the resources that you need to implement it.
Right.
The first major pen test that I was ever involved in was many, many years ago. And the report that we got handed was basically a 500-page report, which looking back on it now, I realize it was an okay report, but it wasn't a great report. There's a lot of Nessa stuff in it. But it was a 500-page report, and the CIO ordered everybody to delete it.
I've had that happen before, yes.
And, okay, great. How are we supposed to fix what's wrong?
Right.
So, that wasn't a matter of management not buying in. That was a matter of management burying things. That's the exact worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
But if management buys in, then you can get the time. You can potentially get the money. You can maybe get an advisor or two to come in and help. You can maybe get policy changes put in place that would otherwise be difficult or impossible to do.
Right. Cool. All right. So I'm going to go back to Miss Berlin because I have a question about the deering, because we've kind of talked a little bit about before and a little bit about after, but deering. Have you ever worked with customers that are doing pen tests and you know about it and you work with the pen testers to, oh yeah, we saw that. Here's what we saw, or, as a way of knowing if the detection mechanisms are working?
Only internally. Yeah, so like if we pen test our own company,
right,
or if it's a retest, those are the only two times I've ever. And I thought it would be weird working for an MSSP that handles both.
Is it?
And they do a very good job of separating it and not. And like there's different management and there's different communication platforms, and it's basically like two companies inside of one because we only work with them when it's initiated by the customer.
Right. Okay.
That independence is really key. There were certainly issues with my previous employer, but one of the things that we did not have an issue with was independence. And I alluded to this a little bit 2 years ago, but there was a case where somebody didn't like the report that we gave and they wanted the original Word copy. And we said, no, you get a PDF copy. They said, well, PDF is hard to copy and paste from. Okay, that's sort of the point. but we were nice enough about it. We said, this is the policy. We do this to to limit the ability to
edit.
We didn't say edit, but we basically said, we do this to maximize maximize the chance that everybody gets the same report. And they said, well, we're going to take it to your management. And I basically said, okay. And as soon as I sent that off, I got on the phone to my boss and I said, hey, this is what they're going to be calling you about this. This is what you need to do. Well, they didn't call my boss. They called the vice president.
Oh.
My boss, however, did call the vice president before they called him and explained the situation. And he told them, no, you don't get a copy of the Word, because if you do, then we don't have control over the report.
Right.
And we had a few of those cases. We had I talked to, I don't know how many QSAs who their first question was, you work for the same company that's providing these other services. How much independence do you have? And I would explain, we have complete editorial independence. We do not have the same reporting arc and all this. And so you do want to be careful about a company that does both and the reporting arc is the same, because in some cases, people will try to use pen tests as sales tools, and that's entirely the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if you can find a company that has proper separation and can do the two of them, it's at least worth looking at.
Right.
And I say that because you should be interviewing any company that you work with, whether it's Ms. Berlin's company or Inguardians or anybody else. You should be talking to them and get an understanding of how they work. Get an idea of what sort of product they produce, get a sample of the report. You're going to sign non-disclosure agreements. Ideally, in order to do this, please sign non-disclosure. Please sign mutual NDAs.
Right.
So, don't be afraid to go out there and talk to 2 or 3 or 6 or 12 different companies until you find one that you're comfortable with.
Right. So we were talking about stuff, all over the place before, during, and after. But so you mentioned here in the before part, the report is the product, get samples. Wait, you want samples of the report?
Yes. So the company should have a generalized sample of what their report looks like. So you can see what the flow is. You can see how they write up the findings. You can see the kind of information they're going to present to you.
Right.
So Inguardians presents in one particular way. Ms. Berlin's company may present in another way. You want to find something that's going to work for you. And it might be that 3 or 4 different companies provide a work product that ultimately works for you, that provides the information you need. And then so you start looking at other factors.
Yeah.
But what you don't want is a report that says, this is broke, you should fix it.
Right.
If the problem and the solution are one sentence each for every single finding, that's a bad sign. If there's a price tag to fix it, that's an even worse sign.
Right. Yeah, no, okay. I never thought of actually giving them a sample report, or at least giving them an idea of the format of the report. That's an interesting thought. So,
as a pen tester, you should have those samples prepared. And as a client trying to hire a pen tester, you should definitely ask for samples.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had some management hire pen testers, and they absolutely hated the report afterwards. They didn't think it was professional, yada, yada, yada. They never used them again. But they should have asked for a sample to begin with, and they probably could have made that determination before even hiring them.
Well, yeah. What was it they didn't like? Was it the writing style, or was it just the format was just real clunky? I mean, because that...
Well, I can't really get into it, but they just thought that it was not something that they would like to bring to their management, like the CEO.
Okay.
And the rest of the C-suite.
Yeah. Well,
so we've had, I'll give you an example of a case where we had somebody who didn't like some information that came in a report was we had this just super gigantic web application. And so we didn't have any choice. We had to do an automated scan for part of it. We did a lot of manual testing, but we had to do an automated scan for part of it. And so we provided them a list of like 600 or 700 URLs that appeared to have cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. And we said, look, these are not validated. These came from an automated tool, but you should look into them. And we pointed out, we said, there's probably some common code pieces that you can find that'll match these up. And they came back and they said, well, we don't want anything in the report that's not been fully validated.
Wow.
And we want you to go back and validate all of these. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're going to need to write another check.
Right. Yeah.
And they just, if it wasn't validated, they didn't want it in the report. And ultimately, they kind of backed down because we pointed out to them that this is still useful information for them, but they were still not terribly happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's quite interesting. Okay. So my company, I work for a company that is not a direct competitor to Inguardians, but Leviathan. We have we try to do different parts in our report. We try to do an executive summary, which is kind of generic. Like we assume a management person might see this, and we're not getting overly technical. So we have like an executive summary and our methodology on how overall methodology with how we do testing, which it does change depending on the type of engagement, because we know. And we're not stupid that, management will want to see what they've paid for, because, if they paid $80,000, then, they're going to get an $80,000 report, but, hopefully they come out all the more secure for that. We Burrs. Yes. I love that cartoon. Yes. Jarrod typed something in next to my initials. So, but yeah, we try to, have an overarching or a more generic version of the report. And then we have, various components or something that we break down. And then we get technical on that side, because we expect the people who are actually going to take our findings for action to, know, steps to reproduce, the issue, if there's a retest, did the retest actually find that these had been affected? So, I mean, it does, I agree. There definitely should be samples, but, your company should be writing a good report to begin with. I mean, if the company that did is asking for the pen test doesn't accept the report as written, there's, maybe they need to go back to the drawing board. So,
mm-hmm. We can update to a degree, but we're not going to completely restructure the report just on your request.
Right.
At least if you tell us ahead of time you need it in a particular format, then we might, but there might be some extra time involved in that.
Would you reformat it if, let's say, they needed certain compliance frameworks require you to test, outside versus in, inside versus inside to DMZ, external to DMZ, that kind of stuff? Would you format it according to that?
Yeah, there's some minor changes that we can do, and we already do some of that. So we have every once in a while we'll have somebody who says, "Hey, can you do a web app test and an external and put it in the same report?" That's an easy enough split to do.
Sure.
But if you're going to ask us to do a complete change up, like everything after the executive summary needs to be restructured and reformatted according to this, that's going to take time. Right. I mean, it takes us time to build out the basic report structure as it is, and we do revise it periodically, but that takes time.
Yep.
And if you're going to ask us to revise it again just for you, then there may be some additional time involved in that. We'll still listen. We'll do what we can within the existing structure, but if you need something that looks extremely different, expect a little bit of extra time for that.
Yeah. Mr. Betcher, do you see the pen test reports that come back for your organization, or is it just depending on the scope of the engagement for that pen test?
It depends on the scope. Sometimes I do, sometimes not. If it directly relates to my team, yes, they'll hand me the report and say, "Hey, how can we improve in these areas?" Mm-hmm. Things like that.
Yeah.
So it all depends.
So there was something earlier. I've got a note here that says scenario. I think you said that, Mr. Betcher. You was like the pen test depends on the scope or the scenario, and you said management sets the scenario. How do they decide that? Do you know that, or is it, hey, we just recently did an IR tabletop and we've noticed these things. We're gonna employ. We're going to talk to, a pen test company and have them to do a pen test based on the findings or the results of this scenario. Is it something like that? Or is it like, oh, they're just throwing a dartboard. We saw this in CIO magazine and that's what we're going to do.
No, I think the management team, at least in the larger companies, probably knows where they're weaker. And so they'll direct the pen testers to that area.
Ah, okay.
Rather than just say, oh, just get in and see what you can find.
Right.
That sort of thing. Because they probably know that, as all companies do, we have a lot of work to do and we have to cover the 80-20 rule, right? But we need to test that 80%.
Yeah.
Right? Don't go after the new hotness that might take a genius to hack. Go after the 80% that we should have down pat,
right? And
see if we have any major flaws in that.
Right.
If you have SQL injection, don't worry about Spectre.
Well, isn't that like one of those next level things? It's like, don't worry about Spectre because, there's about 8,000 other things that are probably more important for you to fix before you have to deal with something that is a hardware-based vulnerability that you can't necessarily fix anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
Ding.
That kind of prioritization is, I think it's getting better, but it still has a lot of work a long way to go in general.
Right. So communication during, before, and after. So before, how important is it for customers to ask the right questions, and what are some of the questions that a client should ask you before the test actually gets started?
They should be asking you what sort of background you have from a defensive perspective. If you have a team, if you're talking to a team that has done nothing in their entire careers but offensive activities, there's a fair chance that they're not going to understand what the practical implications of their suggestions are.
I could see that.
You should also be asking questions about kind of how they. This is getting back to the last thing, but how do you structure a report? How do you write the report? Feel free to ask: are you writing it as you go? Are you writing it afterward? What sort of evidence is going to be coming in? Ask them about any custom tools that they use. Have you written anything, or have you adopted things? And if you see a cool tool that's mentioned on Twitter, what do you do with it? If they say, well, I grab it and I throw it at your environment, that's probably not a good sign.
Unless they wrote it.
Hopefully they understand it if they wrote it. Although looking back at some of my own code, I'm glad that I put comments in, which I guess marks me as not a developer because I actually comment my code. But also ask them, how are they going to get the information to you? If it's just going to come to you in a if the only possible way that they have to send it to you is in a password encrypted zip, and they're going to email you the password, that's maybe a bit of a red flag.
Man, I got stories.
Yeah. I have stories too. I have many stories on that one too. If they say, hey, we've got 3 different ways we can send it to you. We can send it to you, for us, we have an encrypted file share. We can send it to you GPG encrypted. We can send you a zip, and then we send you an out of band password that we usually send through Signal or something like that when we can. We've actually had in the last year, I think I've had 3 or 4 clients that have signed up for Signal just for this purpose.
Oh, cool.
And then the nice thing is we can also then shoot them messages and say, hey, we found on this server at this IP address, we found this flaw. Because we can send it over Signal.
Right.
And we can have this, running conversation, and it's helpful. But it's something that you can sort of have over Apple iMessage, over straight text message. Not really.
Right.
And over open email, it's just completely out.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, one of the other things that we do a lot at Leviathan is we do weekly status. And any of the new findings we put in a status report and give to the customer because we don't want any surprises. You know, if we give them the final report and it's got 50 findings and there's 15, critical bugs and 12 high bugs and, 18 medium bugs and whatever, they're going to get overwhelmed. So every week we try to tell them, okay, this is what we've done for testing this week. We tested X, Y, and Z. We did code review on this mobile, app, that kind of stuff. Here's the bugs that we found. And we tend to have at least a 1 hour a week meeting with the tester, myself as PM, and the point of contact for the customer. And we discuss the bugs that were found and why we triaged them the way we did. And that gives them a chance to look at the bug and get their internal processes started for plan of action and milestones, or, oh my God, we need to fix this now. We can't wait until the end of the engagement, that kind of stuff. We find that, it puts a little more at ease in this case.
Yeah, the during communication varies by client. We have clients that want to have a 30-minute phone call every day.
Oh. Really?
Okay, we can do that. God. But just keep in mind that means you're taking away 2.5 hours of testing time through the course of the week. Yeah, we have others who say, hey, can you just send us a quick summary email each day? It takes 5 minutes to type up. We send it off. It's something like, we found a cross-site script that doesn't seem to really go anywhere, but we're still following it up.
Yeah.
We found so far that all we found is that you need better crypto. Or sometimes we send something off and saying, hey, so your email server, your internal Exchange server is named this, right? We should probably have a quick talk.
Oh.
And, 10 minutes later, we're on the phone with them explaining how it is that we got in.
Right.
And asking them, so do you want us to dump all your hashes off the domain? Because we can do that now.
Yeah.
But it's dependent. Every client is a little bit different. Some of them, it's just like, you know what? If you don't find anything critical, don't say anything to us. We'll talk to you at the end of the week. And, and others are looking for more complete write-ups each week. And frankly, sometimes the half-hour phone call is better than the half an hour of writing up things.
Right.
Because we can get to the point, we can answer the questions. And so.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It seems like it depends. Like we've had customers that's like, have the meeting with us, and then others it's like, oh yeah, we're going to let you in on our internal Slack with a channel, and we're going to, be able to hash things out at the same time. That way we get like a white box kind of thing. I hesitate to tell them that, it's not exactly like secure end to end.
You don't own the Slack servers.
That's on them though. I mean, if they're using it for a business case, then, there are a lot of companies that still use that for that. So, I don't know. Is there anything else we'd like to discuss? I know we're getting here to the top of the hour, and this didn't exactly go along before, during, and after. We just kind of bounced all over the place. But, Ms. Berlin, what does pen testing look like from a defender point of view? I mean, do you guys see an uptick in activity when things like this happen usually, or is it fairly silent?
Ideally,
it depends on the testers.
Yeah, depends on the testers, how noisy they are, and it also depends on how well the MSSP has been managed and implemented. Because you can, like I said, not work with your MSSP at all, and you're gonna send firewall IPS logs, which aren't hard to get by. So, we might not see pen testers at all, and it's super quiet, and then they wonder why. Or there's other times where, the pen testers, even if it is, zero logging almost, we'll still see them because they really don't know how to be quiet.
What's the alert like for that? Do you actually let your customer know, hey, we're noticing some weird stuff going on?
Yep.
Are you required to? I know we have this problem with some AWS stuff, but we had to do like a pen test permission slip. A lot of organizations have to do that. Do you ever have to whitelist IPs to get around like WAFs or something because it's just too difficult? Or do you guys even deal with the WAFs at organizations or Cloudflares or anything like that?
When I worked at the hospital, we did not know there was a pen test going on and had to unblock it after we had blocked it in the middle of one.
Well, good for you. You figured it out.
Yeah, it was like one of the later years when we went through all the very, very painful
okay.
security fixes. I completely lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I want to hijack something there.
Yeah, go ahead.
It has to do with hospitals. And there's also a little bit of a segue here that gets to some of the preparatory stuff. If you have never had a pen test before, consider getting an architecture review instead of a pen test.
Oh, yes.
Because, so not a hospital, but a pharmaceutical company that contacted us, and they said, hey, we would like to get a pen test. And our sales department, our lead salesperson, Jamie, was talking to them, and she kind of realized that they were really maybe in over their heads and said, maybe an architecture review would be better for you guys. And so a couple of us went out there, and we were there for 3 days, and like walking in the door, the number of things that they didn't know meant that we would have had domain admin in like an hour. Literally.
And that's a waste of money.
It's a huge waste of money. But the architecture review, however, we started asking questions, and they started asking questions. And so we got this great conversation going back and forth. And we still haven't done the pen test for them yet. But that's because they're still rebuilding a bunch of stuff, getting ready for the pen test later. But one of the things that we started asking questions about was the threat models. And we said, okay, so, what are your threat models? Okay, are you worried about, a giant multinational pharmaceutical coming in and stealing your stuff? And they said, well, no, because if they were really interested in this drug, they could probably do in a year what it's taken us 5 years to do, because they have vastly more resources. And so, okay, understandable. Do you work with contractors? Yes. Well, where are your contractors? Well, they're in this country and that country and this other country. And we said, okay, so what kind of vetting do you do? Do you issue them hardware? No, they bring their own hardware. Okay. We need to build out a whole threat model for you before you start getting into a pen test. Aside from all the architecture stuff, we need to build a threat model for you with your assistance. We've asked a bunch of questions about it. And that is going to change how you do the pen test. And the same thing with the hospital. When we've talked to hospitals in the past, they're concerned about things like insurance fraud, people getting a hold of stuff in one state and insurance information in one state and using it in another state, which is apparently a very, very common thing. They're concerned about PII leaking. They're concerned about medical records leaking. And then I said, what happens if a celebrity shows up in one of your hospitals? And I usually get silence. And I say, you need to understand, you have an insider threat, which they understand pretty well, actually, because they know that their nurses and doctors or whatever are going to go looking at the records, and they can handle that. Their health record, their EHR systems usually will flag that kind of thing. But, we say, are you prepared for a politician coming in that suddenly might get interest from international espionage agencies to go looking at things? And even though I tell everybody, look, if Mossad is your fear, if the CIA or the NSA or the FSB or the GRU is your fear, go home. You're done. Right. But you still, in reality, you still need to be prepared to watch for these kind of things. If a senator suddenly shows up in one of your hospitals, there's going to be attention on your hospital, whether it's from international agencies or just people who are trying to get a hold of information. And in a lot of cases, it's a threat model they haven't considered.
Right. So when you do an architectural review, you're basically helping them create the network diagrams they should already have?
It's yes, in a lot of cases, there's network diagrams, there's asset management. We'll actually use a few of our regular scanning tools. We'll use Nmap to kind of see what their network looks like. We'll use Bloodhound to see what their domain looks like. Sometimes we'll run Nessus. We don't run Nessus on a regular basis, but we keep a license around just because every once in a while somebody comes in and says, hey, we've got 100,000 IP addresses. Please scan them. Right. You have a week.
Yeah.
Okay. But in these cases, it's like, this is why you should figure out a vulnerability scanner of your own to get, and why you should run it. And we look at basic configurations, and we also look at their personnel architecture. How many people do you have? How many IT people do you have for how many users? You have 4 people for a group, for 100 employees. Okay, that's actually an okay ratio. You have 4 people for 1,000 employees. You need to automate a lot of things.
Right.
So, but once that happens, then if they can get a handle on things, they come back for a pen test. 1, their architecture is in better shape, and 2, they've started learning to ask questions.
Right.
And figure out where things need to go.
Right. Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, we're after the top of the hour, and I know we could probably go another whole hour on this because we've all got stories about poor bad pen tests that we've been given, or like.
So I do want to touch on one thing real quick before we wrap things up.
All right.
And that is, after you've gotten the report and we've delivered you a 70-page report filled with all kinds of things, don't blame people unnecessarily. Sometimes blame has to go, but you have to be careful about how you do that. I'm going to give you 2 stories on blame. And one is a case sort of self-blame. So we went into an environment, and we were supposed to target a particular set of servers. And the lead admin for it was watching. And like every time we did something, his heart sank. And he would come over every once in a while and say, hey, I watched you doing this. And like, as the day went by, he just got more and more pale. And we're just like, okay, look, we're not trying to make you look bad. We're actually trying to help you on all this stuff. And so we talked to him, and we went through things, and he seemed to feel better by the end of the day. But it was like, he was watching his architecture that he was in charge of fall.
Right.
And we said, look, the goal here is that when we come back in a year and a half, or 2 years, or whatever, that it's going to be more difficult. And you've already spotted half a dozen things that need to get fixed before we've even put it in a report. Before we talk to you, you've already spotted some of these things.
Yeah, most people don't spot them at all.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like he was sitting there, like obsessively watching what we were doing.
Right.
And we said, you are doing exactly the right thing. And I know it's rough. I've been on the defensive side, and been there while a pen tester skittered his way through our network. The other side of things was we had a couple of people on site. I wasn't directly involved in this one, but we had a couple of people on site. They were doing an internal test, and the testing ran a little bit late, and everybody around them went home. So while they were waiting for some stuff to finish up, they decided to take a little walk around.
Oh no.
And they found some passwords on Post-its and things like that. And so they mentioned this in the report, and they were doing a debriefing at the end of the week before they went home. And they said, this is what we found. And one of the higher management people said, I want names. And they went, that's not really the point.
Right.
There's a general practice here that I want names. And we generally are all about providing you the information that you need to fix things. But if you're looking for scalps, technically you can get it. You're going to find a little bit of resistance, because you shouldn't be scalp hunting.
Right.
After the report has been delivered. Yes, it's a practice that needs to get fixed. But if you're looking to fire people over some of the stuff, you're not going to be doing yourself any favors.
Well, I would posit that by maybe the people that he's expecting you found this stuff on, not you, the royal you, maybe that like that GSA employee that got fired recently for, surfing the porn all over the place. He'd gone to the training. He'd been informed. He knows what was acceptable and what wasn't. Maybe he'd been counseled before, and you ended up finding it again on the same place to the same person. So he's been told, he's been warned. The guy you were telling that to has probably seen it before. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but it could be that, it's a hygiene thing, and, next time he was caught, it has to be reported to HR. There's additional stuff. So, there could have been a good reason for it other than just hunting scalps.
There could, but in this particular case, it was kind of on the widespread side. And so it seemed to be much more of a systemic problem. If we'd seen it like one or two cases, maybe it would have been, hey, can you go talk to, Jane Doe and John Smith and let them know that they shouldn't do this.
Right.
But it was a larger scale systemic thing, and that is what made us a little bit skittish. And also the demeanor that was involved.
The way it was delivered, the message, give me, Yeah.
When you get, I want names.
Bring me the head of,
Whoa, hold on, time. If it was just like, hey, can you give us some examples of who was involved?
Right.
Okay, well, here's a couple of managers. And by the way, we were in your office too.
Oh.
I don't know if they were in that particular case, but I have gotten into, on the couple of occasions that I've done physical stuff, I've gotten into executives' offices and found interesting things.
Yeah.
But, if we can tell pretty quickly when somebody's trying to get names for retaliatory purposes.
Yeah.
We're not trying to make anybody look bad. Least of all the people on the ground. And because look, if you walked into my office, and I'm sure if you looked around enough, you're going to find something that I shouldn't be doing.
Right.
But some of the people weren't full-fledged security people. They were like, IT secretaries and stuff like that.
Right.
And so, be careful.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay. So, like I said, we could talk for hours about this stuff. The story about hiding the pen test thing. Yeah, I got a story.
Please don't hide your pen tests.
Yeah, don't.
You can limit distribution. You can limit distribution. That's cool.
Right.
But don't just say delete it.
Don't memory hole it. Yeah, it needs to be. That baby needs to come out into the light and be ugly. So,
yep.
So Jarrod, I know we mentioned your Twitter ahead of time, but if people wanted to talk to you about how the pen testing process works, how would they go about getting a hold of you?
You can hit me on Twitter. You can send me an email to my private address, which is jfrates@gmail.com. You can drop me a note at work, which is jfrates@inguardians.com.
Cool.
By the way, I do want to mention one other real quick thing that's sort of tangentially related to this, which is two of my colleagues, Larry Pesci and Suzanne Pereira, our Director of Research and Director of Operations, respectively, recently did a talk also called What to Expect When You're Expecting a Pen Test.
Oh, really?
At Worldwide Hacking Fest. The video is up on YouTube. They talk about some different things than we've talked about tonight. Theirs is a little bit more focused, a little more narrowly on the operational aspects of setting things up. So there's a touch of overlap, but theirs is coming from a little different direction.
Well, damn it. I thought I was being clever and stuff with the what to expect when you're expecting. Damn it. All right. Well, I can't use that as the title of the next podcast then. All right.
That's okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So, Ms. Berlin, you did the mental health village in Germany and at DerbyCon, and you're going to do it at a couple of other places, which we'll talk about in a second. Yes. But you have a new company.
I do. I'm so excited.
She's a legitimate business person.
We just became a nonprofit in Ohio. So it's called Mental Health Hackers. And we are going for our 501c3, which I guess is very difficult because I'm now on page 10 of the narrative of why the government shouldn't charge me taxes.
What?
You have to do this giant explanation and cite sources, and it's a pretty in-depth process, it seems. But yeah, Megan Roddy is our wonderful CFO.
No kidding.
Yeah, she's our CFO, and she's kicking butt. We're setting up Amazon and PayPal and banking accounts and checking accounts and all that kind of stuff.
It's good to be in the know, Brian.
Yeah, I know. Megan's also one of our moderators on our Slack channel. She does a kick-ass job. So
we have 6 board members now. And I think as soon as we get our banking account up, we can start taking official donations.
Apparently my invitation to the board was lost in the mail, but I will accept in absentia the board nomination.
Oh, we have work for you to do. You don't need to be on the board to do work.
Oh, great. So I'm a flying monkey. Is that what you're trying to say?
So I'm doing a keynote in 2 weeks at Secure WV, and it's like I'm doing the second half of part 2 of my mental health talk. And I'm going to talk about the board and the company and things that I've learned over the last year or so. And then we now have 13 different conferences interested in us coming.
Good Lord.
Which I'm glad there's more board members, because there's no way I can go to all of these.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, you're delegating authority and stuff. So that's cool.
Yep. I have a COO that it's his only job is to keep me alive.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Keep you in wine and chocolate?
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes.
Very cool. Okay. So eventually people will be able to donate money to you for nonprofit charity type tax purposes.
Yep, exactly.
Cool. All right.
And I believe we can do it now, technically, but I don't have a bank account, so I'd rather people waited.
Yeah, when I set up my InfoSec company for donations because of training and stuff, it was like a catch-22. You couldn't take money and be a business until you had a bank account, but to be a bank account, you had to have a business, and it was just kind of weird. So, thankfully, I figured out how to do it. So it was in the state of Washington. They're not shuffling. Yeah, in the state of Washington, they're not very friendly to small businesses. It's more like big business friendly. So,
Ohio seems to be pretty good. It took 2 days for our business to be approved after I sent in the form.
Very nice.
I hear federal takes way longer than that. Mm-hmm. But we're technically a nonprofit in the state of Ohio, and then federally we will be one hopefully soon.
You should look into being veteran owned. You are a veteran, aren't you?
I am not.
Oh, that's right. You went to boot camp. I'm sorry.
Susan is a veteran. That she's on our board.
Oh, well, you may want to look into see if that's something you guys can do and get additional tax breaks.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm gonna definitely petition for that if you're in the state of Washington here when that happens. So, couple of other announcements. CFPs for B-Side Seattle, which I will be attending. Deadline for that is actually on the 26th of November, 2018. There's a link in the show notes if you want to get in on B-Side Seattle 2019. It's going to be at Microsoft Commons, the big fancy building there where all the people from the Microsoftians go to lunch. Ms. Berlin says B-Sides Nashville is going on and it closes 31 December. So, if you're looking to talk at a place, B-Side Seattle, we got I want to say 350 people last year. It was probably going to be bigger this year. Besides Nashville's fairly large
Nash
too.
It's one of my favorite conferences.
There you go. B-Side Seattle is, I think, the 8th and 9th of February. Don't quote me on that. You can go look it up. The link's in the show notes, and you can go and find out when that is. Same thing for B-Sides Nash, which is in Nashville, in the state of Tennessee in the United States. Planet Earth.
Thank you for being so specific.
Well, I try. I do what I can. One other announcement. I'm wanting to teach another Sec 504 class for SANS, mentor class. So I need some students. So if you're in the Seattle area, and you have to be in the Seattle area, unfortunately, please reach out to me.
Fly in.
Sorry?
They can fly in each week.
Yeah, I actually had some folks in Vancouver saying, "Oh, yeah, we'll just bring the train down and do the class on a weekly basis." I was like, "Wow, if you guys really want to be hardcore like that, yeah, take the Sprinter down and do that. I can teach in either Seattle or Bellevue. We have discounts if you can actually host, or if you've got 3 people you want to sign up, we can actually get you a discount for that too. But hit me up on bds.podcast@gmail.com. And, if you're interested, because I needed 3 people, and then I can reach out to the SANS folks and say, hey, I've got enough people for a class, and then they'll schedule it. So I'm looking for sometime at the end of February through March to start that. So, okay, announcements are over. Mr. Betcher, if people wanted to get a hold of you to talk about LogMD, how would they go about doing so?
They can get me at log-md.com.
Okay.
For my email, stuff like that. And I'm on Twitter at BetcherPwned. I've got no new companies or keynotes or whatever, but I'm just trying to fight hackers every day, just like Jarrod.
Very cool. Are you on the board of Miss Berlin's menthol health hackers or whatever? Mental health hackers.
I was not in the know in that.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm sure we were number 7 and 8. We were probably the alternates.
You have enough to do.
That's true. That is true. Well, I'm probably first alternate in case somebody can't, fulfill the duties on the board, then I can take over. So
you totally, if you would like to, or we also have like this battle to the death written in the clauses. Like it's really just with those giant Q-tip things.
Yeah, they're turtles. Thank you very much.
Oh, whatever.
Star Trek fan here. Thank you very much. Anyway. Cool. So Miss Berlin,
I caught the 1984 reference earlier. I wonder if anyone else caught that.
Yeah, that was the memory hole thing. Yeah,
that's when I was born.
Yep. And wow, oh God, you're so young. All right, so you're not going to be speaking anywhere, Mr. Betcher, for the rest of the year.
Nope.
Sadly, that's all right. It's okay.
I put in to speak at ShmooCon. I've been shut down every other time, so we'll see how this one goes.
They'll get you. So if people did want to reach out and ask about the mental health hackers or anything else, Miss Berlin, how'd they get a hold of you?
Wait, did you just skip over Brian? Or did I miss that part?
No, we just did it right now. You were too busy catching Pokemon over there or something.
All right, I just wasn't paying attention. It's all right.
Fast forwarded like 30 seconds or whatever.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I blacked out for a little bit. It's normal. It's fine.
Yeah.
I can't talk. I'm catching Pikachu right now. So yeah.
So you can find me at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR, or my new company's Twitter is Hackers Health.
My new company. Anyway, I'm not bitter. That's fine. It's fine. No, it's cool.
Are you just going to focus on this instead of not being, the author of my forward?
Oh yeah, that's going to happen eventually too, I hope. So yeah. Anyway. All right. Yeah. So we have a lot going on the podcast as well. We don't need to be on a board. So we have a Slack, which has a lot of people on it, including Miss Berlin and Mr. Betcher. And Jarrod is actually a user of the Slack. He does not use it a lot because, he's busy doing stuff. So if you're interested in joining the Slack, you can send a DM to @Brakesec on Twitter, or you can email bds.podcast@gmail.com and we'll get you right on there. We do have a social contract.
Or sometimes when we forget, and then we'll get you at the second message.
Oh, yes, I know. I'm awful with that. Yeah. So, we it is invite only, but as long as you're something more than a bot and actually reply to Twitter DMs or, emails, then, we'll get you in. So, we have our thank you to all of our patrons, our Patreon. Everyone gives a little money every month because they find value in everything that was discussed. So if you find value in what you've heard today, or with the upcoming episode of part 2 with the Ian Coldwater about Kubernetes security, hit us up on our Patreon. We have a link in the show notes to that. And, if we're listener supported, we don't have sponsors. It may be something we'll do in the future, but right now, we are, we live and die by the people who help us out. So it's good. All that money goes to hosting and paying for the Zoom, which we're using right now. And, just upkeep and maintenance and publishing the show. So that's all it does. So tell your friends if you've, also if you found value and you just can't give any money. We're on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. If you leave feedback, that's great because other people can find us more easily. Google Play Store. We're on the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, Spotify. Spotify's a big one. most podcatchers have us on there as well. So if you're looking for us, there's no place you can't find us. So we even have an RSS feed, and breakingsecurity.com is our official website. We have a TPub store if you want a T-shirt or something, and that also gives us a little money as well. Miss Berlin set that up for us, which is awesome. And you can get a weird picture of her on a T-shirt, or you can get like one of our new logos on our T-shirts. So,
or the one that looks normal.
Or the one that looks normal. Right. So that was it. Jarrod, we'll definitely have you back in the future. I'd like to discuss Bloodhound with somebody who's knowledgeable on how that works. If you aren't, then maybe you can find somebody who can. But
I'm happy to talk about it. I have a couple of colleagues who know it a bit better than I do.
Okay.
So, and then of course, there's the actual authors for Bloodhound.
Right.
They appear to know something about it.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We could probably see about maybe getting them on as well. Jarrod's longtime friend of us. Even before we did the podcast, and we appreciate all his hard work. So he's. You're always welcome to come back on anytime you want. He's been a guest host every once in a while too. So,
one of these days I'm going to come back on. I'm just going to stare at you.
Oh, well, you're doing that right now, as a matter of fact. So, anyway, all right. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be careful. Be nice to one another. Take care of yourself, because you're the only you have. And we will talk to you again real soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.